Austin Arn, the President and CEO of ACM. Thank you for joining us here for this discussion about captioning. We'll be talking about a couple things during the course of the 90 minutes we've got together. We'll be talking about legal frameworks you should be thinking about, your community should be thinking about, and your partner should be thinking about as you're considering captioning. And then joining me to my right, to your left, is Elizabeth Laval, who's the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Valley Public TV, which is located just across the street.
We are, we're neighbors.
From CMAC. I was kind of amazed by the little media complex that's right here in downtown Fresno. So Elizabeth will be talking about the practical applications for captioning, and particularly live captioning environments that Valley PBS has been doing, because as a broadcaster, you have an obligation to do captioning that's really at the FCC level.
That's right.
I'll talk about that in a second or two. And then to my left, to your right, it's really quite amazing the transformation that Todd Thayer has gone through. He's become invisible. Todd will be joining us in a few moments. Todd is the Executive Director of Coastal Media Group. He has a lot of experience working with both captioning and broadcasting environments. I don't know where he'll be joining us in a second or two. So let me see if I can actually bring up the, am I getting F4?
I don't see you yet. You are not outputting at this time.
Okay. Second screen only, maybe. Yes. No. Extend. Duplicates. Duplicates. I don't need audio.
No audio?
No, I don't need audio.
Okay. Let's take a look here.
Nichivo, as we say in Russia. Okay.
When in doubt, unplug it. There you go.
There we go. All right. That's my contact information, too. And that's my cell phone in case you need to reach me directly. I usually respond. I'm on the East Coast, so just keep that in mind if you're trying to reach me. So we'll talk about PEG and closed captioning obligations. So if I get into the screen. So here's a link to the FCC's rules for captioning, and I think these are sort of guidelines to be thinking about as you think about PEG, particularly with the FCC. I think it's curious that many people are freaked out about FCC rulings regarding captioning, but it's, to my mind, you should know what the obligations are under the FCC and how they pertain to our channels. But be more concerned about other legal obligations that you have either at the federal or state level. So under FCC rules, television channels must be captioned. Multi-channel video systems must transmit captions. Captions must conform to quality standards in terms of accuracy, placement, and synchronicity with action on the video track. Those are the three key things. You can't just have them randomly going everywhere. They actually have to be a certain percentage accurate, and they actually have to be in synchronous timing with the video track. Those are actually standards that the FCC has promulgated. Channels can seek exemptions from captioning requirements for undue economic burden. That's all channels, not your channels. All channels. So that would be a commercial channel specifically. Religious broadcasters actually do this quite often. Actually, you look at the FCC dockets, they're kind of littered with exemption requests by religious broadcasters. And then there's a class of what are called self-certifying exemptions, which pertain to certain classes of programming and certain classes of channels that you do not need to seek approval for getting. They simply are there within the code. You can find them online. I'll give you the link in case you have a question about that. You don't have to prove them. You just have to simply state that you fall within that self-certified exemption class. So, for example, programming between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is exempt from captioning. Programming that's not in English or Spanish is exempt from captioning in the United States. So if you're doing an Oromo talk show, you don't have to caption it, even if it's on broadcast television. And further, certain types of interstitials or non-language related programming are not captioned. We actually had a FCC seminar with the Consumer Bureau about 15 months ago, where someone asked whether or not you had to caption billboard programming, bulletin board programming. The answer is no. It's text-based programming. You do not need to caption text-based programming. That's one of the exemptions. It's self-certified exemptions in there. You don't have to caption musical programming, so that there's like captions that go, for like Strauss, la da 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 da. There's no la da 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 in the captioning, right? It's self-certifying, right? The other thing you should know too about the FCC rule. So here. Oh, okay. Am I not up there now? Yeah, this is okay. Yeah,
it's helping.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate. Good job, Microsoft.
No, it's the projectors in lampshade mode.
So within the last, here we go. Yeah, you get a chance to see all that duplicate stuff too. Nice, fun. I don't know what's going on. Okay. This is just okay. I'm sorry about this, guys. Within the last, and so actually, let me see if I can do this. See if I can. Let's do self-certifying. Oh, there's no internet. I'm not connected. So, I'm sorry about this. All right. Let's go back to. So, what are some of the self-certifying exemptions that pertain to PEG channels? Let's talk about that for a second or two. The self-certifying exemptions that pertain to PEG channels are twofold. The first is that if you receive less than $3 million in revenue per channel, you're exempt from the FCC's captioning requirements. The second is that if more than 2% of your revenue would have to be expended in order to caption your programming, you'd be exempt. So let's give sort of an example here from somebody here who's operating a channel. What's the revenue? Yeah, what's the revenue that you have per year? Yeah, revenue per year. Yeah, for the PEG channels.
Well, the contracts that we have within our city and county are just under $40,000. Right.
So you fall well below the
well below
the requirement. And then the captioning cost would have for the 2% rule, you have to spend less than 2%. So 2% of $40,000 is $800. So to caption your program, if the captioning cost of your programming exceeded $800, you'd fall within the FCC's.
So 1 6-hour meeting and you're out.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about the FCC's rules specifically on these issues, right? So don't worry about the FCC. There's some other things you should be concerned about that we'll talk about in a second. And I'm sorry for the problems here with the PowerPoint. This is really quite annoying. So let me see if I can do the slideshow so you can see this here. Let's do this.
Mike?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify something. I talked to you briefly about this before the session.
Right.
Say if you're a city, and certainly there are some cities I can think of, like Denver, is probably earmarks in excess perhaps of the $2 million amount for their government access channels. It sounds like they would certainly be required.
Do they have more than $3 million for a single channel?
I think they just have one single channel, and they probably do have more than $3 million. But certainly most cities who are running government access don't have that amount to pay direct to the channel, to the.
That's
the
correct.
channel. But certainly, and that's what you're really concerned about here. If you're a city, you don't have to look at your entire city budget and say, all right.
For the FCC's rules, let's talk about ADA in a minute or two.
Yeah,
All right, but for the FCC's purposes,
okay.
they're probably exempt from the FCC's rules, right? Sure. So in the last year and a half, the FCC put out a second report and order on captioning, and I'll give you the link on that, which sets up the responsibility for captioning amongst different parties, amongst the cable channels themselves, programming channels, and program owners. But it doesn't change the exemption rules. So when that order was promulgated, actually there was a lot of confusion, and there were a couple of companies that were calling up PEG channels saying specifically, oh, the rules have changed, you have to caption now, which is not correct. The exemptions never changed. The responsibility amongst particularly program channels and program owners has changed. And one of the other things that the order did is it set up what will be a registration and certification system so that consumer complaints about captioning can be directed back to video program producers as well as to video program channels. As it currently exists, is if a consumer complaint is made to the FCC, it just goes to the cable company and it goes nowhere. So there's no mechanism to ensure that local program channels can actually find out about captioning complaints and actually the need for captions. So one of the things that has been put together in the system is a registration process for all channels in the United States, both non-commercial as well as commercial. A web form will be put together where once a year you put down your contact information, you say who people can contact if there is a complaint, and then you say whether or not you are exempt from the FCC's captioning requirements, and you provide a basis for that self-certifying exemption.
I should go to the website too.
Yeah, and it'll be like about 10 minutes of someone's time to do that once a year. We don't think that's going to be burdensome. The problem that came up from that report and order, if you don't know about this, is that all the PEG channels would be set up as certifying, and all producers of PEG programming would have to certify once a year with the United States, which would mean that every public access producer that ever came through your center would have to actually register with the United States to create programming on your channel. We spoke with the FCC about this. They do not want that to happen. That's the reason.
Imagine that.
That's the reason why we have filed a petition with the FCC that's now in the ex parte process. We think it will be approved. Interestingly enough, when we put the petition forward, we said that we didn't want Girl Scouts to have to certify with the FCC on a yearly basis to create programming on local channels or church groups or, anyone else. They agreed with the language that we originally put in the petition. Both the National Cable Lobby said, that's a great idea. We support your petition. We want to make sure that no channel actually has to register. So please expand ACM's petition to all commercial channels because it's so burdensome, so very burdensome for corporations with legal departments to have to fill out a form once a year. So very burdensome. And then on the other hand, a number of consumer groups working with the deaf consumer groups said that they supported our petition in principle, but they believe that all exemptions should be eliminated. Nice. So we support you, but we want to basically make sure that you have to do captioning regardless of the cost because no cost is too high. Actually, one of them said no cost is too high. So that's going to be part of the discussion that we'll be having. I doubt that they will eliminate the exemptions in this cycle. I would just state that there are deaf and hard of hearing organizations that don't believe exemptions should exist. That's a problem for our organizations, primarily because of, I think, the fact that they should be on the same side as us in terms of trying to get more information to more Americans. We're about access, they're about access. And I think it's not in the interest of organizations to have deaf and hard of hearing groups lobbying against you. I think you end up losing if you do that. So we need to make sure that we're working together and that they understand the economic situations that organizations see themselves in, find themselves in. Your case in Merced, right? is a very, very powerful one. You know, suddenly if you had to include captioning cost into your production cycle, you'd have to reduce your programming radically, right? That's part of gets to the next thing I want to get to. Even though we'll go forward a little bit here. So there's some key questions you should be asking yourself regarding captioning that specifically have to go to ADA obligations, FCC obligations, and other obligations if you get federal funding. So there's like three key screens that you need to be looking at as you're considering whether or not an organization has to caption. The first one, are you exempt or are you non-exempt from FCC rules? That's the self-implementing exemption URL that I'll share with you. That actually details the sort of 20 exemptions that exist. You are, in all likelihood, exempt from FCC captioning rules because of the size of your operations. Okay? Are the captions that you use compliant with FCC quality standards for accuracy, timing, and placement? They're described there in that link as well. That's to ensure that if you are doing captioning, you are complying with those requirements. Those are key questions you should be asking vendors as you're looking at building relationships with vendors. Are they FCC compliant? How do they ensure compliance? And so there's some issues that you need to be thinking about in terms of like accuracy rates. 95% accuracy of English is gobbledygook. It still is not understandable. So just keep that in mind. So those are two sort of screens to think about. The other one I would just sort of point to, frankly, is obligations that nonprofits and local governments have under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You've heard of it, I hope. It was passed in 1991 by the first George Bush administration. It's been the law of the land for over 25 years. It's nothing new. The thing that I think is very curious is that most of our channels, because we haven't had the we've had the economic exemptions in our FCC requirements, have not necessarily thought about our ADA obligations. And just as if you're designing a production facility and you have ramps, accessible doors, accessible computer equipment, or you're doing accommodations for people who are hard of hearing or need translators, if you're in a community-based setting, that's your responsibility under ADA as a Title III nonprofit entity. Local government, as a Title II entity, has an obligation as well to specifically effectively communicate with citizens. And it's a different burden of proof under ADA that you have to be considering. So that link that I have is actually a very good guide that the Justice Department has put out for effective communication and considerations under ADA. I won't go through them all for the sake of time. The specific thing you have to know is that it's the obligation of a local government or any entity to articulate whether or not there will be an undue burden if an accommodation is provided for effective communication. Okay? It's your responsibility to citizens. And further, it can't just be your opinion. It can't just be sort of like your gut. You have to be reasonable and actually show what it would cost to be able to provide captioning for programming, A. And B, somebody who is responsible for the operation or for the government channel in some instances has to actually publicly state this, because it's a transparency obligation that you have under ADA to tell citizens that I can't provide accommodations because of costing. All right? So the suggestion that ACM is making to every organization that provides any kind of video is you should be talking with vendors about what captioning costs would be for both live environment and non-live environment.
And capital environment.
Well, right, but you should be determining what capital and operating costs would be for the programming that you provide, say, on a yearly basis. And then you need to be making an argument as to whether or not that is an undue burden. And then further, someone in responsibility has to agree. It can't be somebody in the tech department who says, oh, no, it costs too much.
Oh, no, absolutely.
It has to be probably a departmental head, for example, if it's a government operation. It has to be someone in an authority who has public responsibility. Actually, ADA articulates that. So that's in that link that I'm giving you. So, I mean, so my recommendation is talk to vendors, come up with what a plan would look like, and if it's outrageous, you need to articulate that for someone who's in authority. Let me go to the next thing. And Randy, you've got your hand up, but let me keep looking. The other question I have is, if you're a nonprofit, does your nonprofit entity provide government services to a local government entity? My suggestion to you is that they are subject to ADA requirements that probably go beyond what you are obligated for as a nonprofit. Further, if they're a county with a multi-million-dollar budget, it becomes much harder to say that they have an undue burden. So the onus is not on you, the onus is on that public entity. So there's a very tricky dance that needs to happen here, because as a subcontractor for government services, you'll have to probably find a way to articulate exactly what they need to be spending to be able to provide that government service. But that's not your obligation, it's their obligation. I think one of the fears that a number of our organizations have had is that if this is articulated to a local government, the local government will freak out and they'll defund public access television, right? So we're advising people to get ahead of this, to understand exactly what the costs are, and enter into a conversation with the local government about what their burdens are to their citizens. Because it's not you, it's them, right? And then the last thing I'd say is does your organization, or does the entity that you contract with, do they receive federal funding for delivery of public services? The classic example here is a community college that gets federal funds for e-learning. Well, there's a reason why those e-learning programs are captioned. It's Section 508 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Which says that if a public entity receives federal funds, they have to deliver those services to everybody in a community. So that's the reason why PBS, for example, has been captioning forever, because of the federal funding specifically that goes into certain types of educational programs. There are requirements that go beyond the FCC duty that they have as broadcasters that specifically go to educational content that is available to all Americans. So I think the particular instance here is if it's a community college that has an e-channel where they're delivering services or some type of educational learning, they have a positive obligation. If they get federal funding for that, they have a positive obligation to provide captioning that I don't think they can. There's no argument actually about Section 504 or 508 at all. There's not even an undue economic burden.
It's actually worse in California because the chancellor's office, community college chancellor's office, has decreed that anything that goes on the web of a community college entity must be accessible. And so if you are providing content to a community college in any way, shape, or form, you should be aware that at some level that's going to have to become accessible.
Okay. John. All channels. Well, I'm not. The conversation today is not really strictly about CVAA, which was passed in 2011, which talks about video accessibility standards in internet environments. Jim Horwitz's presentation will have some material about that. Basically, all video that. How does it work? If you have an exemption in television and you're rebroadcasting that exempt programming, the exemption goes to the internet as well, right?
I'm seeing today that there's cost of caption for internet as in not live, something that's done after the fact. The cost is going to drop to a very small number. Still doesn't help you on the broadcast side.
Correct.
It's not that much different in cost.
Correct. So I mean, and you guys, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth and to Todd on this, but I mean, like that's the reason why I think like for like DIY situations, YouTube is actually a very, very nice nice cheap product because you upload the video, you turn on the transcript generator, you can download a text transcript. It'll be about 95% accurate now. It's actually improved a lot in the last couple of years. You still have to edit it. A lot. Now, there are services that will provide you transcripts for about, what is it now? It's about $1 a minute. $1 a minute for a transcript, which is supposed to be, an accurate transcript that you could then load up into a script file on video. And then there are services that will take that script file and then will basically do that for you if you want. There's a joint venture of Google and the BBC called Trent, which is doing a lot of this work. There's a number of other sort of online places that are using machine learning. Elizabeth was just talking about another group that actually does like a content farm, and who knows, it's probably in Bangalore. It's probably got like 10,000 people like whacking away at, coming in, and basically they will has its challenges as well. But you will find, I think, that this is probably going to be accelerating in the next couple of years, and the price of the machine captioning will be going down radically.
Side of video.
Yeah.
So they stop the experiment.
So I'm being mindful for time here. If you've got questions about the policy stuff, I can take those now, but I want to go to Elizabeth next and then go to Todd. So, yeah.
If you could afford to caption a channel instead of all three that you might have, and you did that, say the government media channel,
Sure.
would you be opening up the door to why don't you do the others?
Politically, maybe, but not from a legal standpoint. How's that? And my recommendation has been, we captioned it when I was operating channels in St. Paul. We captioned programming that we would distribute to public television because we did, right? And we would basically bake that into our production costs because we would be working with external partners to be able to provide production costs for programming that could be distributed beyond our footprint. And that cost was not that great. It was probably like an extra $150 per hour. So, if I'm doing a contract with a healthcare organization or with a state agency and it's a $3,000 video, adding the $150 onto captioning is a small incremental cost. So that's just one thing to think about in terms of the production cycle, especially if you're thinking about broadcast distribution. But we would find also that it was extremely useful, particularly for government agencies that were trying to do outreach to communities that didn't speak English as a first language, because captioning is an extremely useful educational tool. You can stop the video, take a look at what's going on, you can actually read the words, and then it also helps with search engine optimization. The text search actually will help increase the visibility of that video. So so if we can find a way to make it happen, there's all sorts of advantages about it. I would say that government channel is probably the best place to start. But I would say, again, depending on how the arrangements work between your operations and the government, local government, I can't remember what community are you in again?
That particular community would be Santa Cruz. I'm also in Delaware, but it's not.
Right. So so it would be up to the city of Santa Cruz in that instance to determine what the cost would be and if they have an ADA obligation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm putting together the cost to caption the government meetings already because they know that's coming and they need to know what to do. But
Right.
I thought if I could figure out a way to make it affordable for them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some tricks to do it. I think. I don't know if this is the case in your environment, Elizabeth. I've seen bulk contracts for captioning with vendors where basically you're trying to drive the price down per hour.
It doesn't come down a lot.
It's not that
Yeah.
much.
It's 125 to 135 an hour ad hoc, and I've seen it come down to maybe 95 to 100.
I've seen like 85.
85.
Yeah.
$85.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but you probably get you get nonprofit, most favored nation. You got
You have all those things.
everything lumped
The
in
halo.
all at once. If you
Right.
just walked in tomorrow and said, I need an hour of live captioning, it's going to cost you $125 to $135.
That's been my experience. Like captioning.
Right.
Like Captioning Colorado does it.
Right. But this has been actually something that's discussed in a couple of discussions with communities. Is this like a camel's nose in the tent argument? That suddenly, if I caption one thing, I've got to caption everything. On an exempt channel, under the FCC rules, there's nothing that says the exemption disappears if you're passing through caption programming. And actually, we do that all the time. NASA, let's say you're running a NASA feed or something like that, that's captioned. Your exemption doesn't disappear, right? So I wouldn't worry about that. It's the ADA obligation, particularly, that you have to be thinking about and working with the city about. Anyway, so let me turn things over to Elizabeth. You can talk a little bit about your experiences with Valley.
Yes.
But go ahead. And I'll
So I want to just talk a little bit about the practical side of closed captioning coming from the government entity that has no option. We have to caption everything, and over the past 5 to 7 years, the laws have got increasingly more stringent about not only accuracy and placement, but also online and every other aspect. So really what I would say, first of all, I think captioning is a little bit misunderstood by the public because they think it's simple. And it's really not simple at all. You're laughing because you think it's true. It's not simple at all. And captioning, it seems like, oh, how hard can it be to sit and type a bunch of words on the screen? But you have to think about all the variables. For example, if you're trying to put captions on a show that has lower thirds, and you're trying to keep them off the lower thirds, you're trying to, if you have by chance some transcription on the bottom, well, now you've got to move your closed captioning out of the way, or it's sitting on top of some of the words on the bottom. In any case, this is something we don't have any option on, and we do it all the time. So it's a big part of our daily lives, and I would say without exaggeration.
So in other words, you're saying the production design of your graphics package
Yes.
have to coordinate with the mandated placement of the captioning window.
Correct. Or you have a little leeway in moving where the captions go if something's below, but we're not supposed to leave it on top. We can't layer things on top, and then I will tell you, if we make that mistake, I get 20 calls the next day. Because unlike some of these stations, we have it on our website that says, if you want to complain about closed captioning, call me. And I'm happy to take your call. I got to tell you my favorite story of the last year. It was terrible. So we implement a number of different ways of captioning. Sometimes we don't get our local productions done in time to do them in-house. We try and do it in-house. It's a great opportunity for interns. If you've got a show, it's in the can, my encouraging to you is caption it, because there are people that believe in captioning, and it does nothing but help. It's not that big of a process if you get it in-house, someone transcribes it, someone sits down and you get the software and sync it. It's really not that hard to do, except when you don't have that, and we were doing a pledge show, one of our favorite things to do, and the show hadn't been captioned either, and it was on the Buffalo Soldiers at Yosemite, and the soldier's name was Elizy Bowman. Want to guess what the caption came back live? Anybody? Elizy Bowman. As we're watching this in horror, going, lazy bones. Because the people on the other end have no context. It doesn't matter if you tell them in advance. All they're doing is sitting with a headset, typing away. And so my first preference is always to get the shows captioned if we can ahead of time, one of two ways. We do use a service for some shows. We'll send out the track. We get it back. It's transcribed. And then we correct it because 95% is not allowed. We are 98.99% accurate. We have to be, or then we are in violation of our FCC guidelines. That's our favorite way to do things. Of course, when you're doing, I think, particularly what you're saying about your government channels, you have to start thinking about captioning those things. It's something that you should write in with your partners, work with your partners. I think Mike is alluding to that, but I'm saying it very strongly. Your partners need to have captions, even live captions, even goofy captions on those meetings because it's something that people expect. The general public does not discriminate between a PBS and something like you're doing with the access channels, and they're going to expect higher quality, and especially on government meetings. So I think you're on the right track. Take that as your first channel. I think on your pre-produced programs, there's no reason that you can't caption it. For really, there's no reason you can't. You can have someone come in and sit down and transcribe it and get it in the software, put it out there. For me, as a broadcaster, I'm much more likely to say, I will take your show and put it on my channel if the captions are accurate and along my standards. So when we talk to CMAC here about things, we'll say, hey, don't forget, if we're going to take this show, you need to have these elements, or anybody that's on bringing a show to us.
We can't say anything like that. If people produce a show and want to put it on our channel, they can't.
Well, but
No.
but to be clear, there's no reason why you couldn't be making sure that if somebody wanted to reach out to the deaf and hard of hearing community, they could be producing that caption track. And actually teaching
They'll
that,
work with you.
teaching that would actually be a useful thing,
It is, it's a skill, yeah.
right? There's no reason why you can't be setting up your editing systems so that there's a base setup for the insertion of the data, but you have to train you'll have to train people to do that.
Workflow.
It's work, exactly.
Yeah.
So in our case, we probably make use of all the different opportunities for captioning live. Now, up until now, anything 10 minutes or under, like a pledge break, has been exempt for us. That is going the way of the dinosaurs very soon, as are all the exemptions that we had for web. So it's going to be within 4 to 5 years where every single thing, whether it's a 30-second spot or anything that we do, has to be accurately captioned. So I'll give you a scenario. We have a show, let's say it airs tomorrow night, and we haven't gotten our act together because we're late and it got delivered. You guys never experienced that, I'm sure. It just got there, you just got ingested, everything's great. So we call our caption service, it's US Captioning, it's in the Midwest. Open the line, it's pretty simple. They listen, they type, the captions come up. It's very nice for us. However, we're going to play, as we're PBS, we play the same show over multiple times. Within 7 days, I have to sync those captions. That means ingesting the caption track and going in and actually then accurately syncing. Because, of course, with live captioning, you're always a few beats behind.
And that leads to a point. If you are paying for a live captioning service, make sure your contract includes the file.
Yes, the file, exactly. Immediately.
Includes the file.
Yes.
And I email the second the show's over.
That's right. And so we happen to have a show on right now called Outside with Greg Aiello. It's very popular, and our goal has been to get it on the web at the same time that we have it on the air, which means we have to do the captions in advance. And on the days when we haven't been able to do that maybe the producer delivered it on the day it was going to air. Of course, that happens sometimes. We did exactly what Todd is saying. We got the file. I had somebody there in overtime. They got the file, they synced it, and they got it up on the web. Because for us, we have to have accurate captions on the web as well. From my point of view, it's something that is only enhancing the quality of the programming that you're producing. Most of us are related to some kind of government entity or an educational institution. We should be taking the lead on captioning, just as PBS did in the 70s by creating captioning as it exists today. There are lots of ways you can do it economically. I think we've talked about build it in your budget. If someone's going to produce a show, I think you don't have to do every single thing, but honestly, there are programs that deserve to have captioning so that you're not only keeping the deaf and hard of hearing community happy, but it really is a strong thing to say our programs are captioned because your viewers will care. They do care.
One other thing we found too, and this is actually an argument that comes from consumer groups, is that access to government information it lies at the heart of our democracy.
It does.
So groups that are on the margins of power need to be included in access. So that ends up being the sort of the access mission of captioning, frankly.
It does.
And so I think the challenge we have to find is ways to be able to build it into our economic systems.
And I can't encourage enough for that to happen because, as Mike is saying, you don't want access groups against you. You need, especially in the climate, you there all the time, but I just spent a week in D.C. With the public television trying to cover our backsides for the next decade or so, which may or may not come to pass. We don't know yet. But anything you have that is on your side, of course, for us, there's education and all the things that we do. But captioning and being accessible is certainly a feather in our cap. And it's something that can't hurt. And it can be done in an economical basis. It is workflow. It can be a tricky thing, but it's something that we really encourage that you try and build in. You want people on your side, not pointing out, because the general public doesn't distinguish between you and us. They just think, oh, you're a channel, you're having these government meetings. Why is there no captioning? I mean, I would think that there would be a lot of question about why there wouldn't be. Even if it's not the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law.
And then you work with different vendors for both live captioning as well as post captioning services, right? We,
of course, WGBH, our mothership, the inventor of captioning, always has that. You'll see that on all the network channels, captions provided by. And honestly, it's a funding opportunity. We can get closed captioning provided by. We're allowed to do that, even on non-commercial television, where you can find someone in your community. It's a nice way to bring in some operational dollars that say captioning provided by, and then you can build into that the human cost, which would cover that. So it's not just the hard cost of the actual bills that you're going to get, but someone inside your station has to manage that. So let's say that your budget for captioning was $2,500 a year, hard cost, that's out the door to the captioning services, but you can double that and say my labor time is that as well. It's a little bit of a nice way to bring in some operational dollars for interns or staff or whatever else you want to do.
So that actually might be an underwriting opportunity.
It's an underwriting opportunity.
Yeah. So, and specifically, I'd say for businesses or groups that care about empowerment of communities that have disabilities. And one of the areas that I think will also be useful to look at is whether or not they're either county, local, or state services that specifically support people with disabilities, or philanthropies that support people with disabilities.
That's right.
Looking at them as possibilities for either support, underwriting, or grant opportunities, I think would be very, very easy to do with all of your copious free time.
Elizabeth, you mentioned about having, I don't know, was it maybe a station volunteer or something, transcribe?
Yes.
A pre-recorded show. My question is, maybe Todd knows about this. All right, so you've got this file of a transcript of the show.
That's next.
How do you sync it in?
That's next.
That's right. That's his. Yeah.
Okay.
That's next.
It's a software issue.
Tools.
Yeah, it's tools that you have, but it's really a nice way to reach out to the community, because we found that people, if they think they're getting to actually transcribe a show, I've had volunteers transcribe whole series for me and put them into Spanish, and it didn't cost me anything. We work with Fresno State, so we work with our high schools, and they're quite good. Actually, they're very good at English still.
Yeah. And I would think,
Yeah.
I mean, and actually, it's interesting. Do you fall within one of the Spanish markets for?
We do.
Yeah, right. So there was another
We had a
issue
Spanish
here.
station
You got a
until
Spanish-
January. Yeah.
Right. So that's part of the other sort of outreach obligation that was in the federal rules. And I think in California, particularly, trying to have the Spanish language
That's a
outreach
little
is
harder.
important.
I want to finish answering your question really quickly before I answer yours. We do a service that's actually live captioning on the air. We use U.S. captioning. They're in the Midwest, and for us, the rate is about $45 a half hour, and it's $85 an hour. I think we probably have a discount, but you're also a nonprofit, so that's okay. They send up the file. I mean, we live caption it, and then within 7 days, as I said, we have to sync it. We do that internally because it will lag, and there will be mistakes, and we're allowed to air it a couple of more times, but then we have to get it synced up. And then sometimes we're using a transcription service, which is very simple. It's sending out the track. Within 24 to 48 hours, they'll send you back the words, and then someone's sitting in our back at the computer and syncing up. You get pretty good at that. It's a nice opportunity, a good skill set to learn. And then sometimes we do it ourselves. We'll just have somebody inside start from scratch and sit and type it into, because the good thing about sitting in front of the computer with the show, by then the lower thirds are inserted. We have, for example, if we have interviews in our farm show with Hmong farmers that it's hard to understand, we may have made the decision to transcribe some of that on the screen. So now we need to move the caption somewhere else. You will get complaints about how fast they go, how long the lines are, how quickly they move. What else? I mean, you can think, if you can think it, someone complains about it. And you're just trying to get it right. But there are some optimum lengths and speeds that move along. And I've actually had to have hosts who would start a show that were trying to introduce everybody within 13 seconds. You can't do that. I can't get my captions up there that fast.
Yeah.
Slow down.
I think Amy Goodwin's going to have a problem with her closing caption, closing credits, if you've ever seen that on Democracy Now!
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Font. Well, there are some standard font. It's standard font.
Realize that's internal to the decoding device.
Yeah. And
This is just a bit stream.
sometimes they don't allow punctuation, which makes you, as us as an educational entity, look really dumb. And getting complaints about that. Don't you know how to spell? It's not that. It's just that the captioning software only allows these ways of inputting it. It's very touchy. It's got a mind of its own. Is that not true?
Yes.
It does. So we do use a gamut of different things, which is why I was happy to come and share how much fun captioning can be. But you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about captioning in Spanish. You were saying that you've had volunteers do the Spanish captioning.
Yes.
So my question is, are they captioning a Spanish language program, or are they captioning an English program in Spanish?
In this case, because Valley PBS had a Spanish station, we have 4 stations. It's a Spanish language channel, and I wanted to air my English show in Spanish on the Spanish channel, so it needed Spanish caption.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A number of vendors will actually do that, will provide you not just English language captions, but a translated caption for an extra fee. Montgomery County Media, I should say, so the county government service channels caption in both English and Spanish in Montgomery County, Maryland, just because of the large number of Spanish speakers that are now in the D.C. metro area. Yeah,
You do it with Salinas at Gilroy and all
yeah.
that,
So I mean, the question it's a greater cost increment than just a straight up English caption.
It's
So,
true. It costs more.
Yeah, so it'll be about a third to half as much above that caption
And
amount.
dare I say that it's very important that, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway, that you have someone who is completely bilingual sitting there and syncing the captions, or you can run into some really obnoxious problems.
I want to turn to, actually, I'll give you a funny story for a moment, and then I'll give you a couple more resources and then turn to Todd. I first started doing Spanish language programming when I was in Minneapolis. We were doing health programming in English, and we were translating it into Spanish. And it was all done on volunteers. Nothing was professional. And I had a volunteer from, grew up in Andalusia, and a volunteer who grew up in Panama. So,
Completely.
and so, right. So then, we had them talk to each other, and then, we spliced the thing together because it was still audio tape. Yeah. And we played it back for people, and it was just, people would laugh out loud because it was like someone coming from Oxford meeting up with their sister from Alabama.
Yeah.
And they're like, so the context is everything.
It does matter.
Yeah, it totally
does
is.
matter. And really, if you, even in English, take the time to have somebody put a second set of eyes on something. If you're going to take the time to caption well, because it's even a few misplaced words can cause a lot of drama, and that's not helpful. You make sure someone else has authority to put their eyes on something, especially if it's in another language. Get a second opinion, because it can be not good.
And then we're going to turn over to Todd here to talk about some production practicalities. A couple of the resources just to pass on to you. There's a website that is put out by an association with the National Association of the Deaf called DCMP, Caption Service Vendors. and it's a list of about 50 caption service vendors from around the United States. So if you want a sort of a central resource list, it's actually very good. dcmp.org is the name of that. And I'll shoot that to you in that email that I send you with my materials. The other thing I'd say is that ACM is having a webinar next Wednesday, actually giving some perspectives from captioning vendors as well. Justin Cowgill will be hosting that. You might know Justin. He's the CTO over at Create TV in San Jose. He's going to be hosting a number of the technical webinars that are happening over the course of this next year that ACM's provided. They are free to organizational members of ACM. So if you're not an organizational member to ACM, you can get free webinar training on this and other issues. Just saying, because we're having a sale on memberships through the end of... Sale on memberships to the end
That's my line.
Sale on memberships to the end of March.
That's my line.
But that's you can sign up for that on our website right now. It's going to be Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll be perspectives from. We'll have 3 different vendors talking about their work. Go ahead.
On the webinar that's coming up on Wednesday, I had understood there was going to be a list released of different captioners throughout the U.S. Is that still the plan?
Yes.
Is there any way to get it before Wednesday?
I think the best thing for me to do is to give you the list from DCMP, because I've looked at actually, it's like 50 captioning agencies from around the United States.
Because we're doing an RFP right now, so it'd be helpful.
Yeah, go to dcmp.org. And then there'll also be the vendors that will be on that call will not be pitching their services. We're not going to be talking to them about cost and stuff like that. It's not meant. It's really meant so you understand the production process that they go through and things you should be considering as you're looking at options. But you can contact them. They'll have contact information as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So let me turn it over.
Good afternoon. I was running a little late because I was actually talking to one of our vendors who has a box who creates a caption file on the fly, and I want to be able to give you a little bit of information on that. Could we have the projector turned on again? Thanks. My name's Todd Thayer. I am not the executive director of Coastal Media Group. I'm actually the director of engineering. I went back to the dark side after running a media center for 12 years. My first venture into captioning was actually open captioning in 1997. Worked at a company called the International Channel that covered the Hong Kong endo. 36 hours of live Chinese-English translation with open captioning. 2 tag teams of 3 translators live for 36 hours. It was insanity. Just that part of it, let alone the coverage of the thing. And so then as life went on, you deal with it where you deal with it, and then I ended up at CAPS, which is up in Ventura. And one of our institutional partners is Ventura Community College. So we would put together, short form, 6-8 minute videos highlighting some of their focuses that they do. And so we built, as has been discussed, we built into the cost of the project the creation of captions for them. Because the State Chancellor's Office of Community Colleges says you will have, they don't have to be on the PEG channel, but they were intending to take it immediately to their website. And so we just baked it into the cost. It was available on the channel. So throughout all of this, I would say as a technologist, the first thing is make sure all your hardware during your capital process supports and passes closed captioning. Servers,
Yep.
specifically
servers. Yes.
Can be a glitch.
Media translators. For instance, if you're using small media converters from AJA and the other company we won't mention, most of them will not translate closed captioning. Okay, you have to get up into the FS1 frame sync, and you have to get up into the Teranex 2D minimum for a hardware device to translate from SD to HD or vice versa, closed captioning. Couple things real here you should know about NCI, ap.org, that's the National Captioning Institute.
They'll actually be one of the
preferred vendor.
one of the vendors. Yeah. There's DCMP,
DCMP
that I was talking about.
So this is another huge resource. There's a ton of stuff out there for this on the web. You can Google that stuff. It's available. what I'm gonna try to focus on, and we don't have a lot of time, is most of you have questions about the tools. So there's a variety of ways that you can take the what and the why to do the how, okay? This is just bits, right? It should be easy. You just sit down and type it in. We spent 2 years at CAPS leading up to trying to figure out the best way to do workflow, especially in a access environment with volunteer or intern or low-paid, community labor. We found the best way for us at that point in time, and this is now going back 4 years, was Sony's Vegas editing system. It had a very, very comprehensive method for putting captioning in. Unfortunately, as I was starting to do research for this panel, I heard that Sony's no longer actively developing Vegas. There are still versions of it out there that you can get. It is still a very good editing system that deals with captions. Okay? Premiere Pro apparently does as well. I have an aversion to licensed pay-as-you-go software, so that's just me. If that works for you, I don't know anything about the latest version of Premiere and how they handle captioning. What I will get to in a few minutes is open source free tools that you can go and download and get started right away. There are three main aspects to what we're talking about here: live, post, and then there's the hardware workflow underneath. Unless you have specific questions, I'm going to kind of stay away from the hardware, except to say a couple things. Evertz is kind of the flagship of the industry. The 884 is the SDI version. They make an HD version. This is like a $6,000 box. Until you go to eBay, you can get them for $30.
But the idea is that that takes a
You plug in a phone. Your live captioner dials in over the modem. You can either put another phone line in that they dial in to listen to your program, or as I did in Oxnard College, we put in a small barracks audio streaming server for $400, and we plug their program into it. The captioner can log in via the internet, open up a media browser. It plays back the content. They only do one phone line, and they dial in and do the whole thing. So if you have specific hardware questions, I can get into the weeds a little more afterwards or in a Q&A session, but don't get scared off by the new well, except unless you're a government entity where you have to buy new, which is one of the silliest things in the world. Some of this stuff is available literally for pennies on the dollar, and if you decided tomorrow you wanted to go in closed caption, we could walk you through, and you could get this up and running for a few $100s in equipment costs, rather than $8,000 for the new box.
and in that instance, you would need to have an encoder where? You'd have to have an encoder.
At your head end, well, it's at your server point where you feed your head end. It's your last mile. So if it's SD, so for instance in Oxnard, they have an HD server which supports captioning, and we'll get to flavors here in a minute. We down convert, we push it over fiber, and then we translate it through an FS1 to an analog NTSC modulator
But
to a copper iNet, where it is then remodulated onto the new digital plant for the cable system.
So one of these boxes per
channel.
Per channel.
For live.
For live.
If you're not doing full-time live, you could put it on a router and move it around to channels, depending.
All right. So that's the capital cost
That's
for live.
equipment. Capital having a different,
The
potentially different.
equipment cost for
Equipment
live.
cost. Now, one thing I will throw in is our company Enco, who is a vendor here today, and if you're doing this, you should go talk to them. This may be something for you. It is not 95% accurate, but for somewhere between $1,000 and $1,800 a month, you can get a probably 85 to 95 range captioned stream. You can, and they'll give you they give you the file so you can repair it later. But it's you lease it from them for an access organization. You thought it would be between $1,000 and $1,800 a month, and you can get a 90% accurate caption of your meetings, and at least push the argument down the road. You know, you still have a whole issue of your archival records and that whole piece. But at least you can sit there for $1,800 a month. You can say, we have taken our best shot at cost effectively delivering some method of captioning
That's-
for our hard of hearing
Is that
audience.
in a live environment?
That's live. It's a hardware voice recognition
What is
system.
the quality standard for live for FCC captions? Do you know?
I think it's a
It's 95%.
95%.
Yeah. So I don't believe that they're going to hit 95% very often. I could be wrong, but most of the machine translation that I've seen doesn't come anywhere close.
Yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
the question becomes this.
What's that value of a 90 to 95?
Have a library, build a library of weird terms that.
Doesn't really work on the fly.
No.
We have never found that even when we provide Tuolumne or whatever it might be in advance, it doesn't, you can not even tell what it is that they're talking about.
I think we could probably get volunteers to take that transcript, fix it, and stick it on there for eventually, but I think we're right on the moment.
One of the great places for any advice, I would recommend everybody should know about CreativeCow.net. Creative Cow's forums have workflow for just about any oddball thing that you ever thought you wanted to do with video. This particular one is really well put together. This gentleman uses two open source freeware pieces of software to do closed captioning. It'd be really cool if you had that pre-existing file coming out of the ENCO box, so you didn't have to start from scratch. Yes, ma'am.
What was the name of that again? Creative Cow?
CreativeCow.
CreativeCow.net.
Okay, thank you.
That is it's a digital videography user group / forum / mess. So the two that this gentleman used, and I did a little bit of research on, the first one is called Nixie.dk. It's out of Denmark, and it is under a GPL license. Basically, it is a little toolkit, and you open it up. It'll also do translation and a number of different things for language support. But this basically is a little toolkit, and if I'd been really ahead of the curve, I would have downloaded it and could show you a demo. The other one is Aegis UB, and this is some screenshots. Let's see if we can open one of these up. So basically, it launches a media browser. It gives you your in and out points. It gives you your spot for your text. It gives you a spot for your location. All of the metadata about where that caption is going to go. So you have the ENCO, you do your live meeting, you take that file, you drop it in here, you touch it up, clean it up, boom, boom, done. I don't know, maybe, Elizabeth, do you know what software you use when you do cleanup?
Yeah, I'll just have to think about it for a
Okay.
second. Yeah,
So
let's see.
this is, as far as tools go, these are two tools that will do this and can get you up in captioning tomorrow. Yes, sir.
Just for the record, I've actually used this piece of software specifically, and it's not as easy as it appears to be.
Oh, no, none of this, okay, I'm sorry, I'm moving through this because we have a little bit of time. None of this is as easy as it looks.
No, it's
Just
not.
like video editing.
Yeah.
None of it is as easy as it looks. The timing is odd. How long it stays up, where it's going to live, all the things that Elizabeth mentioned.
Where you're gonna
None of
break.
this is easy. And you're going to do what I would recommend is you take a 30-second spot or you take a minute spot and you do it, and then you watch it and you learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to make you're going to make 3 or 4 iterations as you develop workflow. Yes.
As far, from experience, as far as pre-produced content is concerned, I find that YouTube does the best job. I upload material to YouTube. YouTube actually transcribes it over 95%, I guess.
Yeah, I have a problem with the copyright issues on YouTube. So.
Well, but if you're producing the content, I mean, look. Let me just be
No, I
clear about this.
understand. I understand.
Let's be clear. Everyone understands what you're talking about for that YouTube hack. You have a private channel. You're not sharing it with anybody, right? It's Fred's channel. You upload to Fred's channel. You turn on the transcript generator. It generates a text file. You download the text file. You will probably have to clean up the text file, particularly for regional accents. So if you're in Alabama or northern Minnesota, there are probably some issues.
Oh yeah.
Right? Oh yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Or heavily accented English of any type. The things that are at the margins it has problems with. But as from a low-cost hack, It works great for generating transcripts. They will not be 100% accurate, but for your purposes,
You pull it into the editing software and clean it up.
from a DIY standpoint, it's great.
And you don't have to pay anyone.
Right.
You basically get the timings, and YouTube is fairly accurate with the timings. So
It must have, I haven't done that in a couple of years. It may have gotten a lot better. I think it has. So a couple of other things, just as far as buzzwords, try to give you some education. Used to be that closed captioning was done in the vertical interval of our analog signal on line 21. Then we went to digital, and you had EIA 608 and EIA 708, which have now merged into CEA 708, which is the MCC file. The MCC file is your gold. That is what you have to have. Now, a couple other things we haven't talked about that this does, and the ENCO file does as well. It gives you a transcription service. You now have a printed transcript of every piece of content that you have. Metadata is valuable. Okay, you not only have a caption, you can now let people download transcripts if you so desire. PBS has been doing that for years too. So you're to deal with it used to be the, what was the one before MCC? SCC, the Scenarist file. Scenarist was the authoring handbook for DVD and Blu-ray, and their captioning file format that they use to deliver captions for authored material was called an SCC file. And it handled EIA 608 and 708 differently as two different things. And then as this has developed over the last couple of years, MAC caption, basically the MCC file format, and the CEA 708 format became the standard. So when you're talking to people about what they support, you want to support MCC. You want to support CEA 708. If somebody comes along and hands you an EIA 608 or a line 21 encoder, unless that's exactly what you know you need, be very careful.
Or SRT or WebRTT.
Well, and those are different applications. But generally speaking, for most editors, you're going to want that MCC file. Now, the other thing I will toss out, and I just ran across this last week in a trade magazine, there's another company, a piece of software out there now called CineEdit. I'll have to look it up. Anyway, it is a insert editing application for flat file video, which allows you to edit audio, video, and caption data without re-rendering the file. $1,500. So $1,500 for software.
Wait,
how much did you spend on VTR?
So what would be the?
So you open up the application. Okay. You call up a pre-captioned show, and you're putting a syndication tag on the end. Without re-rendering your 2-hour program, you drop in a 30-second syndication tag.
That's cool.
You need that
for $1,500. It lets you edit video, audio, and caption data. Very cool stuff.
So I mean, and I think that the most important thing that I'm hearing from what you're saying, Todd, is conceiving of the caption data, the text data, as being integral to the program delivery stream.
Yeah.
So that I joked about this over lunch. It's like, let's have programs without vertical hold, right? because I think
we control the horizontal.
Right, because I think within our environment, within PEG channels, we were only thinking about the video and the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some places weren't even thinking about the audio, really. But that's a different workshop for us to be talking about audio capture. But the text functions within video now are just as important. And I think our challenge as we think about sort of going into this next into these next horizons is finding the ways in which we can be a part of that world, because it's going to be integral to the use of video. It really is.
One of my mentors said, you produce once, publish many. So when you produce a thing, the more about that thing that you can capture, the graphics, the caption, all of the information, okay, that becomes part of the archive. That becomes, when you talk about why you caption a program, because it creates a value node.
It does.
It creates value in perpetuity. If you can't understand the dialect, but you can still read English in 150 years, assuming we have a machine that will still read the file, a caption program is more valuable
Yes, robots will be reading our videos
There you
at that
go.
point because they won't understand the vowel shift that occurred in 2019.
But we won't care.
We won't talk about the vowel shift, the great vowel shift that will occur. Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
this is the English language nerd in me coming out. All right, could you do one other thing for me, Todd, as you're pulling up?
I'm still trying to find that one. I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Could you look up Trint, Trint? There you go. So this is a joint venture of the BBC and Google, and it's in beta right now.
Slowly I turn, bit by bit.
The average age of a Google engineer is about 14 years older than the average age of a YouTube engineer, which is why there's more hope for Google and speech to text than there is on the YouTube side.
Interesting.
In terms of YouTube is
Interesting.
incrementally getting it better, but Google is kind of regional accents and that sort of thing.
Interesting.
More mature.
Service.
Yeah, should be it.
Sorry, the internet is slow over my phone.
Well, while that's loading, the other thing I'd say to you too, if you're thinking about this as a niche audience, 10% of Americans have hearing loss.
And we will be one of them.
It's the fastest.
The
it's-
70s and 80s concerts
it
that
is-
we went to.
It is the fastest growing disability community in the United States.
Well, and I think
And
also
my guess is a portion of us are here. I mean, I've got tinnitus from my years of operating a rock club. So don't,
I wasn't kidding.
He's not kidding.
But I think people use it anyway because we don't just sit down and watch TV as much. You just catch it as it's going on. There's something maybe else going
And-
on, and you want to you don't have the volume up as much. I mean, we've had it on in our house since the kids were little.
And it's an essential tool in distracted environments.
Yeah.
And
Saved our marriage.
Yeah.
You know, watch it with the captions.
Yeah.
I don't have to listen to the show. I watch it sometimes.
Yeah.
let's talk about this a little deeper, John.
John's telling tales.
Okay.
So this is just their services page, instant timing, adjustable time code, highlights. This is the transcription part, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Alelo is using this program. And they're trying to hack it for their government services. They currently are doing state government programming. And I was just talking with them recently. And they're beginning to try to figure out exactly how to put this into their workflow. It's because it's like instead of $1 per minute, it's 10 cents a minute for the finished product. So the finished product then gets dropped down to like $30 for a half hour or something like that. If I'm doing is that right? $1 a minute? Yeah, it's $1 a minute. Yeah. So you can begin to see the economics even for these vendor services to start going rapidly down.
So this is Cinedeck. This is the editor I was talking about, where you take a flat file with a number of codecs, and you have the ability to go in and do insert, editing, video, audio, and caption tracks. So if you wanted to drop in, you take an existing show and you shoot a fundraiser and drop it in.
Actually, that would be a huge time
I mean,
saver.
this on its face, it sounds like a $1,500 piece of software that nobody needs. But then once you start thinking through the applications of it, incredibly powerful.
Right.
Guys are just blowing my mind. This is amazing stuff. I'm trying to come down to encapsulate what you're saying into something that I can recommend to folks about. Here are some ways to go about it. It sounds like for live programming captioning, you really need to go into something like you folks use US captioning.
So the first step is how are you delivering your content, and where do you put your encoder? Then how do you deliver the bit stream from whoever is generating the encoder to whoever is generating the bits to that encoder? And then how much do you want to pay?
And my sense is that that's like in your instance, Christine, as you're talking about the vendor solution. That's where the negotiation occurs. Let's say it's so many hours of live programming that you wish to caption in the course of a fiscal year. That ends up being the contract term, and then they may have.
You attach the dollar amount to that.
Right. They may work with certain solutions, right? So.
But I wanted to continue
Yes.
Yes.
How we get the software
Right.
that syncs it timing-wise.
Correct.
Yes.
But also I'm hearing this interesting thought about uploading it to maybe setting up a private YouTube channel.
Correct.
Upload it to there, get it transcribed, then drop it down, and then use software like this.
To fix it.
edit
To sync it.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. 3Play Media is a 3Play Media is a captioning vendor out of Boston. They're a little more expensive, but they actually have been advocating for DIY solutions, and they've got a page that specifically talks about that YouTube hack. So,
One question I had too is, what about second audit, secondary audit?
SAP?
Yeah.
What about it?
What if you're simulcasting a program that is in English and then in Spanish? How do you deal with closed captions on both of those?
You're not required.
You don't.
Not required. Thank you. That's what I needed to hear.
The
But
one-
is that coming in the future?
The one thing I wanted to say about why we outsource to somewhere like US Captioning is they're required by law to meet the mandate of FCC. So if they weren't accurate enough, they would go out of business. So if you try and bring someone in who's sitting in your studio and they think they're going to try and do that, you really don't have any recourse. The FCC will, for us, acknowledge that we were doing best efforts to try and ensure that we had paid the money to have a bonded service that was creating that. And if you've ever tried to do it, you should try it. It's not, put a show on and see how long you can keep up with accurate captioning before you go, I got to stop it and pause it. It isn't something that just anybody, I don't recommend volunteers for that. It's something you want to pay for simply because you're on live and you just don't need any mistakes. And someone, you really need somebody that's a company that's their whole reason for being.
But again, for pre-recorded stuff.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. You've got a lot more.
Very good tip, sounds like this stuff. Then have someone else look at it.
Yes, always have someone look at it.
Don't ever just rely on the person who made it.
No.
Now, here's a hack, John, you'll appreciate this. One thing I thought of, maybe Elizabeth and I can have a conversation. I always thought that finding a school that taught court reporting.
Yes, we've used them.
Okay.
And medical transcribers.
and actually, National
yeah.
Court Reporters Association
Yeah.
is one of the organizations that does live captioning services. If a county had court reporters
And could make them available during a
on retainer,
Yeah.
then a county might be able to have that retainer float for those government services.
Now, has anybody done the hardware interface, though, to make sure the character set to the encoder is the same as the output of the electronic court
Yes,
reporting?
yes.
It has been done?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Yeah, and actually, National Court Reporters Association
Has already got a portal for that.
does that.
I use medical
Yeah.
transcribers too. People that take doctors' files and listen to them and have to type them into the file. They're used to hearing a fairly fast-paced conversation with some kind of accuracy because they don't want to have to go back, and they do a great job.
So, go ahead.
In TOA, in the last fall, there was a court reporting, captioning firm from Texas, and they talked about that the best captioners were merit-rated captioners. Have you heard of that?
I have not, but
So I don't know if that was something specific.
We might talk about that next week. We can ask that question we'll have.
I'd be interested to hear the answer.
We'll actually have a representative from National Captioning Institute and someone from LNS captioning on next week's call, so we can talk specifically about that too. I don't remember that term either.
I've never heard that term.
My guess is it might be something that's certification oriented, right? So it might be like a certification service that occurs for the profession.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was, but I hadn't heard of it otherwise, other than at the NATOA conference from that Texas firm.
That might have been Carol student from LNS.
So you have
Maybe it was,
real-time, legal video, diplomate, merit, professional. They have a number of
Okay.
different certifications.
Interesting.
I've never
So-
looked at that.
Huh. I'll be darned.
The other topic we haven't really touched on, but it relates to your channels a lot too, are sports, which is a lot harder.
Way harder.
just because you're out in a uncontrolled environment most of the time. But it's just something to keep in your mind. For me, the main thing I would like you to take away is don't try and do this after the fact. Build it in as apart from the ground level up, and then find some best practices for your organization. Sports is one of those things, if you actually watch it and they're captioning, they do a great job, really. And a lot of, at least here, our folks do a lot of sports. And it would be someplace that I'm sure, they even have the little music sound. Okay, music's playing now. There are a lot of requirements, but it's something that would be valuable for people to be able to enjoy.
Say you're doing a live program and you've got it connected to someone's captioning and sending it back to you, you're putting it out on your cable.
Yeah.
Can you expect it to also automatically go onto your live stream, or is that a separate set of hardware?
No, you
No,
can't.
you
automatically
cannot
expect
think that. No. It's, no.
No, you have to.
In fact,
It's a whole different
most
setup.
streaming encoders do not support caption translation.
And actually, so this is sort of like an evaluative question you need to be asking vendors as you're going into this world, right? Because let's say you invested in some type of streaming mechanism because you wanted to reach more people, and you find that you are doing captioning programming. The FCC requirement under CVAA is if it's captioned on TV, it has to be captioned on internet.
Right. So
And they're not the same kind of file
Right.
at all.
Right.
They
Right.
don't translate to each other. You have to actually decide you want that kind of file, and
So-
it doesn't come down
And
that way.
as I read CVAA, even if you're an exempt channel, if you do have something that's captioned, you should translate the captions. Same reason why,
Well, let's back up a second.
Yeah.
If you produce an MOV with captions on it, okay, and upload that to deliver on a website, those captions are there,
Yeah.
okay?
That's not live stream,
Streaming of a stream, that data has to be pulled out, data recovery, there's a decoder that will pull the data out of that stream and feed it into a different encoding platform for the streaming process.
Yeah.
It's another level of complexity. That's not to say you shouldn't do it, but it's just, one of these things is not like the other.
There's something you can invent.
No. People way smarter than me doing this.
Okay.
But you get it. What's the SCP file? No, what's the Smile? There was it was Smile, and it became something else. Markup. Gosh, I can't remember.
So we're just about out of time. Any key takeaways for you guys?
Do it.
Things you'll remember?
There's some definitely good stuff, especially for economical ways to do this, getting people a little less scared of it.
I think that's right. I would say though is if you're making an estimate for ADA requirements, don't underestimate sweat equity.
That's what I was saying.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so while DIY solutions are like you're doing volunteer time, that volunteer time and organizing those volunteers all has material cost to your organization. So even if you were coming up with a DIY solution, and I don't think you can do DIY live captioning. I'll just say that.
No, I
straight
disagree.
up, straight
I
up.
totally
Oh, you can.
But let's
don't do
really,
it.
really badly.
Yeah, don't do it. No.
I don't think one can do that and be FCC compliant.
Thank you. There you go.
But if you do DIY, please don't discount the value of your labor and the labor of volunteers. That has to be a part of the economic analysis that you do. Has to be. And I think one of the problems that we often have in our world is that because we do things low cost or no cost, we think there's no value. And I would say that your time is extremely valuable. So if you're building time into this service, it has to come at a cost of some sort.
Quick prognostication about how long it will take these people, these vendors, to come up with something that's a whole lot more accurate.
It hasn't happened very quickly. It's been 45 years. It hasn't happened very quickly.
5 years.
Right?
I'll give you 5 years.
10.
I think longer, yeah.
5 years, but we've been saying 5 years.
Yeah, I don't think it's 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have an asymptotic relationship to the future,
Yes.
John. It's
It's
just,
just-
beyond our grasp. It
Yes.
keeps, I would say, I don't know.
Part of the problem is that the human voice, every human voice is different. And to expect a machine to take just the three of us here and to process the next string of words in an identical manner, y'all come.
I will push back a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
I will push back a little bit because I would say that there are some serious advances happening with language recognition systems that are being driven internationally.
Well, no,
Right, so
I don't disagree.
Right.
But like your Spanish, Castilian versus whatever your Spanish thing was.
Dilution.
Them's different.
I remember
My
Yup.
mama always said life is like a box of
Now,
chocolates.
See.
in the car, you just immediately talk to it.
I-
You no longer have to train a device that can understand your voice.
So what I'm saying is the commercial applications of voice recognition will be everywhere in our world in the next 5 years.
Yeah, the
and
li-
it will be ubiquitous.
And the liability side of it will slow it down.
And I'm telling you, if you go into a room and ask the number of people who have an Alexa,
How many
okay,
people have an Alexa?
that's a small little company called Amazon, right? And they have a competitor. They have competitors that are trying to get into the home market for automation and Internet of Things. To be able to have ubiquitous computing that's voice recognized because they can't trust us to type, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just
For
saying.
the same reason that self-driving cars scare me to death as an engineer.
Understanding of the folks up in Minnesota or in Alabama, or how are they able to instantaneously understand all these dialects?
Oh,
Phonemes.
so
Familiarity.
There are key phonemes.
see, but I'm not a scientist. I know some scientists. I mean, the idea, frankly, is that you have systems that learn. So the thing that I would just suggest to you is that we're on the edge of actually having more and more computer systems that learn. All right. On that happy note, anything else? Okay. Anything else? If you have not given me your contact information, let me know and I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoints. I'm sorry about that. We'll also send you some other links too. I want to thank you guys for taking the time, and please do, kind of poke around with ENCO, just to kind of kick the tires on that type of solution. And I would strongly suggest you think about solutions that you're trying to figure things out, because I think it's the best way for us to get ahead of this and actually build expertise as we're going. Because my sense will be is that there will be other types of solutions coming up that we want to try to adopt and be ahead of. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Dave, open the pod bay door how?
I don't think it's. I mean, so